Righto, back in Queensland after 8 weeks on the road. Gee, you folks that do this full time are much hardier than me. I love coming home to my big bed, my big computer and a decent shower. Anyway, today, just a quick chat about 3 things, something I said I'd never do. 3 things that I noticed of interest to me, maybe others, don't know. One to do with tyre pressure, one to do with oil life, one to do with van tyre wear. Okay, so I spent a bit of time getting my tyre pressures right, where I want them, or what I think is right. A few weeks before we left, my old SCA tyre pressure gauge seemingly had done a battery, so I put a new battery in it. Looked to be working. I probably had it for 8 or 9 years. I go to check my tyres. It was working the day before when I got my tyres to where I wanted. Thought I'd check them again before we left. Murky, rainy morning. Of course, it wouldn't work. Put another battery in it, still wouldn't work. So I had to duck into town and grab a new one. Bunnings was the closest. I ended up with this rather tidy Ozito machine. So they've added some features. I get a flashlight, warning light. I can unlock that thing. I get a little hammer, smash the window. Should I be hanging upside down, needing to get out. And this very tidy seatbelt cover, which is just going to lead me to a little story before I get into the 3 things. The first thing now is I asked my wife this morning, well, where is that tyre pressure thing, because it's not where I left it. No, she said it's in the pouch behind the seat. Well, that'd be fucking great if I need to get it to cut something. I'd need to be rather flexible. But anyway, this would have come in handy for the chap, one of the 3 that diagnosed me insane when I resigned. This would be the young chap in his 30s, the holder of an MBA or Masters of Business Administration. Allegedly, he'd had a big night on the soup. And I say allegedly because I didn't see it, but plenty of people are willing to say that was the case. And gone to drive home. On the back road. Flipped the Hilux, December 21, pretty wet. Flipped it into the table drain and we're starting to get a little submerged around the head. Now, luckily, he was a skinny bastard. The stouter build like myself would have been thoroughly rooted. But anyway, he's got out and avoided all trouble. And of course, they've tried to quell rumours, but the rumours were already hot. That was about when I lost the last modicum of respect I had for him. Not sure that I ever respected him, or whether he just got my respect from the default of me respecting his father-in-law. But anyway, a number of things made that respect decline. This one just knocked it on the head. You want to run a big organisation like that, you've got to be better. You've got to do better. Anyway, there's lots more to that story. So, number 1, we headed off from here on the 10th of July. Murky old morning, bit of rain, always wet in my yard when I have to walk up. Shit straight in the car. So off we went to Nindi Gully. It's about 380 k's, 380 kilometres from here, southwest. And you basically free camp at a pub. Always good to have a feed at the Nindi pub. And of course, Nindi Gully is the home of the Road Train Burger. So we hooked up and getting ready to leave the next morning. Would have been 10:30. We were parked north-south. And I should have known this. I'd been kicking myself for not knowing this. I'm sure everybody else knows it. Started the car up. And while my wife was doing the checks, she checks what I've done, just to make sure we haven't forgotten anything. I thumbed through the menu, had a look at the tyre pressures. So the right-hand tyre pressures on the car were 5 psi higher than the left-hand side tyres. And I thought, oh gee, that old SCA thing must let me down again. Anyway, I decided to leave it. Theoretically, we were only going to do 100 k's that day. And got to Dirranbandy, and just before I filled up, I thumbed through the menu again. You can't thumb through the menu while you're in motion, which is fine. Front left, front right, back left, back right were equal pressures. So I run different pressures in the front to the back. I figured it must have been the sun, so I probably had sun on it. Gets up over the pub, 7:30. Probably had sun on it from 8 till 10. Couple of hours, 2.5 hours of sun, warming the tyres, had increased the pressure. I just get to thinking, wow, gee, these blokes running these race car teams, pretty important issue. Understanding road temperature, ambient temperature, speeds, just to get those pressures right. Anyway, I ran that test a number of times and didn't let me down. Each time was 3 to 5 psi higher if on the side of the sun, if we were parked in that orientation, and we did actually have sun. So really the only way to do a cold tyre pressure is in the garage or on a cold and cloudy old day. Of course, we also have, it reads in bar, PSI and kilopascals. But as I said, kicking myself, I should have known that. I've let myself down. I'm sure everybody else does know that. Second one. So this Ford, and I'm sure other cars, gives me an oil life percentage. And I've spoken to a couple of guys at Ford about it. And the first one is reasonably high up in the show. He told me that it actually is measuring the oil quality, which leads me to the question, how? You know, I guess there's various sets of methodology you could use, and the first one that comes to my mind is NIR, near infrared. Used a lot in the grain industry to start with. And what are we measuring? We're measuring carbon. How are we measuring that degradation? And I said to him, well, are we going to be able to do oil changes and services, or oil changes at least, based on this number? And he said, potentially yes. So that's not a yes and that's not a no, that's potentially. So the second guy said, no, it's just an algorithm. We didn't say no. He said, it's just an algorithm and it figures out that percentage of your oil life from the type of driving you do. Now, we do very little super short driving, you know, get in the car. Well, we just don't. We just don't get in the car and do a kilometre. Our shortest trip would be 10 kilometres. Not great for a diesel, but not as bad as the 1K trip down to the shops. So in the first 5,000 kilometres before we left, we had used 36% of the oil life when we were sitting at 64% of remaining oil life. In fact, I was concerned that should that run at zero while we were away, would I need to get a service before the 15,000 kilometres came up? But there is no doubt a diesel does like to work, does like to get hot. So that was the first 5,000 kilometres. We've done, for all intents and purposes, 10,000 kilometres. I'll give exact numbers later when I talk about costs. 9,800 and something, but anyway, 10,000 kilometres. And getting home, we've still got 25% oil life. So 36% for the first 5,000 kilometres and 29% in the next 10,000 kilometres. So theoretically, there's still 25% oil life there. Be interesting to see where that goes, and these things are just matters of interest for me. And the third and final one is some really odd and interesting wear on the rear left axle and the front right axle of the van. Can't quite figure out what's driving it. My initial thought was I had the pressures too high because it looks like an overpressure wear around in the middle. But as we went, that wear developed and we're sort of wearing one set of knobs in the middle, then missing two, and then wearing. So I don't know if the quality of the roads we've been on are activating the sway control braking. Don't know. I changed the settings a couple of times in the car, the sensitivity and those things. But anyway, in the next few days I'll pull all that apart, pull the wheels off, have a look at the shock absorbers, and probably give it an alignment as well. And that's not too hard on this one. I don't know about everybody else's, but we'll do all those things before we go somewhere again. So that was the big three. Well, not really big three, just three things I felt like babbling about, and I've now babbled about them. Gave me the opportunity to get another shot at these folks that want to diagnose me as insane. Those shots will keep coming, so you'll just have to get used to it. You don't get forgiven for that sort of rubbish, but they'll never know. They'll never know if I am or I'm not. And look, I'm not having a shot at the mentally ill. I've grown up around mental illness. As a 6-year-old, going to my grandmother's for Sunday roast, it was a regular occurrence to have my uncle, who certainly wasn't playing with a full deck, pointing a 308 or a 243 high-powered rifle of some sort out the window from 30 yards at us. Don't know why he never fired it. So the old man would go in and they'd punch on for a little bit. He'd get subdued, settle down while two kids and my mother is sitting in the car waiting, and then we'd all sit down and play Happy Families and have Sunday lunch together. So I certainly understand some of the concepts of mental illness. I didn't see him much. That was back in the late 60s. They ended up taking him away to the mental asylum in Toowoomba, and the next time I saw him, well, I didn't see him. He was in a box. I was asked to go to his funeral, I think mid-2000s, somewhere there. Don't know how he lived, don't know where he lived, don't know what he did for money. So I understand mental illness, and I'm not having a shot at the mentally ill, but I sure can have a shot at people that think they are qualified to diagnose mental illness. Anyway, till next time, we will say au revoir.